Welcome to the Krystal Effect. I'm your host, Krystal Appleby, and I'm here to share honest, wild truths I've learned through being a practitioner for myself and others on this crazy journey of life, career, and relating. I'm not crazier, braver, bolder, or more experienced than others. Rather, I do believe I'm here to share with a deeper level of honesty than most. It's just who I am. Superficiality and mediocrity are pure boredom here, and I do believe the deepest truths and depths of our soul will set us and others free. With an allergy to anything withheld in connection and conversation, we're going to dive right into any limits or lies we tell ourselves, pierced through the mediocrity or fears of diving deep into the truth. I hope to give you an opportunity to reactivate your knowing and zeal for living, rather than to be triggered, squander life and joy, and shrink away out of my energy field. But as always, choice is yours. Let's dive in. Welcome to today's episode of the Krystal Effect. It has been a minute, and I'm not even sure where to begin, so I think we just begin. And it just felt important to come in here and let energy start to flow again into this space. Without needing to apologize, without needing to make sense of, rationalize, explain. And I think it's really important to touch on this because whether it's in business or your friendships, your relationships, there's just different seasons. And there's going to be seasons where you have so much capacity and desire to go out and help others, to pour into others, to pour into your business, to pour into your clients. And there's going to be seasons where you don't. And for me, I've been in a deep, really long season, which I've never experienced, of this space of simply no. Everywhere I turn, everything I pick up to create, every hit I get to launch something, to reignite something that's already been sitting there, it's been a resounding no. And for the first time in my life, I have decided to consciously sit with all these pieces and not let any part of my being react. And use the gift of restraint to just be with them. Let conversations sit, let ideas sit, let all of it sit, even when the generator in me, the piece that loves getting a hit of adrenaline, an insight, an epiphany, and going and running with it. The amount of times I've had the hit to come and record a podcast and dive into a topic. And then when I sat with it, it was coming from a place on the deeper levels of reactivity. Well, I could create an episode on this. I just went through this in my business. I'm frustrated about this. But what happens when we remove all of that and just let ourselves sit in, whether you see it as, or it feels like a pressure cooker or whatever, that stillness and that building, allowing that building of pressure to come into your system without having to do anything with it, whatever that is. I truly believe that so many diamonds and gold nuggets in our life can come from these moments. And this is a season I've been in of, okay, I'm going to do this. I'll start this. And I can start to feel momentum build, but I know I don't have the same adrenaline or energy to follow through on those things. And instead of saying, I'm a manager and that's how I work, I pick something up, then I start something new and that's my gift and that's my whatever. And I think that's part of our growth, is to go through that and learn like, oh, this is how I function. I'm meant to be multifaceted and have all of these ideas. But I've seen it with people I've hired and with myself in the past few years where there comes a time and a level of maturity that's called upon us where it's time to put all of that down and intentionally sit with each project, with each facet of ourselves, and really see where we genuinely are in love with our process and our life and the facets of our business and of ourself, and where we're holding on to things that are creating outward success, that are creating outward fulfillment, or the generation of energy that creates something that should make us feel, look successful, create security, whatever that is for you, whether that's having the full client load, the promotion at work, whatever that looks like in your life. I think there comes a point where the thrill starts to wear off. And for me, that's been this transition into almost like, I don't want to say childhood to adulthood, but within adulthood, this spectrum of maturity that's like a scale. Okay, just like grab that little button at the bottom, almost like a volume button, and turn it up. And what's been required for me to turn that level of maturity up has actually been to turn the volume all the way down on my life, and not on my voice, but on finding that discernment in when to use my voice and when to allow the volume to just be turned on to silent in conversations where I want to react or, explain my side of the story or whatever, and just let others have their process, let others have their experience, have their judgment, have their beliefs on me or my business or whatever I'm feeling pulled into restraint on. Let them, without needing to explain, without the ego having a hissy fit, and just continue on your path. Even if you don't know where the path's going, even if you can feel energetically, especially for all of us who, so many of us, it's like we can call it empathic, we can call it highly sensitive, we can call it whatever, but our journey has led us through places where we started to micro read, tune into, and as a result, it's like on this subtle energetic level, micromanage the universe, the people around us, try to tap in so we can sense what's going on, and then try to control an outcome, whether conscious or not. So that's been my learning, and it's been so potent when I've been able to actually turn the volume all the way down, dial everything off, and let the outward noise be there, not ignore it, take it in, and then allow restraint to create pressure in my system and in my life, and allow me to transform those old ways into actual new neural pathways that have become solidified in my system, and then start to ripple out into my life and show me the new way of how business can be, even if it's uncomfortable, how growth can be, even if it's uncomfortable not to hustle, even if there's still an impulse within me that's trying to go out and create more, that's trying to do things in the old way, can sense other people being like, oh, she's not pouring into this, she's not creating this. There's so much potential in this. Yes, yes, and yes. And I can feel that from the outer world and then my own inner dialogue, but I can still sit in silence and hold myself. And I think that is one of the greatest accomplishments that I've had in my life, is to land in this spot. And I really noticed it when I came back from Hawaii last month, that I just came back different, that it was like, I will never be in that space. Not that there will never be uncertainty, that there will never be, questioning or aloneness or making mistakes or reactivity, whatever. It's all going to show up again. But there is something that happens when we allow the pressure of life to come down on us and transform us without having a hissy fit, without letting the ego just run out of control and point outward. It's like every time the last, especially couple months, something was projected out to me, whether subtle or loudly, intentionally or not. Sometimes I lost my shit, but I always sat long enough to then take that arrow and turn it in and own the part of me of that was true. And also let go of the part of it that wasn't me or my truth anymore and was being projected at me. And in turn, let go of that anchor or hook that had been put into me from somebody else and say, no, this karma's done. Like, I see it. I don't need to react or tell you that I believe that this isn't true. There is no right or wrong, but I will not hold this hook in me for your comforts, for my own people-pleasing tendencies, so that you think I'm the nice person or that I'm this or that or whatever. And I think when we start to take those hooks out of ourselves and give them back to others with love, and also at the same time knowing that you're taking one out of others and taking it back and looking at it yourself and owning all of that, the outward world starts to matter so much less. So I could go on, but I feel like in essence, that's the process that I have been in. All of these pieces where I want to or have wanted to create success or thought I needed to build community or be of value, or I'm here for impact, I'm here to be of service, and all these things I've told myself, especially over the last year when I've come to this uncomfortable spot of stillness. And I'm like, no, business needs to move. There needs to be momentum. It's time to create. It's time to take action. And yet in all of these spaces, when I look over the last year, there was truth in there. And I know what I'm good at, and I know where I know how to create, whether it's income pockets or impact or cool ideas in the community. And it's much easier to go out and act on those and create them and try to drum up energy underneath them than it is to just sit and be like, no, this is not the season for that. It doesn't mean that I don't care. It doesn't mean that I'm not trying to create impact. It doesn't mean that I'm not being of service in the world. It means that I'm becoming, and I'm allowing myself to become, and I'm being responsible for all of myself and holding all of this accountability so that I can become a new layer, a new level of myself, a new evolution with new maturity. That yes, maybe it feels like I have not been of service as much in the past 6 months, a year. But time, this era has taught me that time really is such a joke. We need it for our linear minds to create this timeline. And, then we can also, the liver gets to create order and a direction. And that's not bad. But when we hook on to the time and make something of the time, that's when we start to lose our potency, lose ourself, because all of a sudden we lose trust in life. And as soon as we lose trust, we start to hand over our power. As soon as we think that our current situation means anything about our worth, our success, our future, we give away our power in however we learn this, whether it's through relationship to self, to business, to partners, to friendships, whatever it is. And I don't believe that we really become somebody who can hold and contain ourselves fully through life and remove ourselves in the moments we can't and take responsibility for ourselves in those moments and go create space or have somebody else support us in a container so that we can actually be responsible for ourselves even when life is falling apart in the worst ways. But I don't think that happens overnight. I know we come into contact and have certain relationships or build business or whatever for purpose. And sometimes those things, they do help us create a sense of self and create that inner power. But I think until we sit and let every outward hook, thread, connection, validation, just be. Doesn't mean that it drops away and we have to let go or cut out everyone or anything around us in these seasons. It just means that you let the threads drop, the threads that are connected to all of our people, all of that collective consciousness that brings us all together in this beautiful web, and sometimes not beautiful. When we let all of that drop for a season, and all we can do is kind of keep adding pressure inward. And I see, the cocoon when it's the word I want to say is not right, mutilating, but there's a transformation in there, right? When everything's kind of transforming into a totally different state. I really believe that's the only way through if you want to really build the most solid foundation for the rest of your life that doesn't have to be keep being recreated over and over and over. I believe you have to go through a master cycle of death and rebirth, of going through, getting into the cocoon, letting everything get gooey and ooey and unknown, the ultimate unknown. And then you rebuild yourself inside that cocoon. You don't know who you're becoming, where you're going when you come out of it, or if you are, but you solely allow it to happen within that container without reaching in all the directions. And for me, that's always been easier to step out and say, I'm going to create a workshop, my school community, my this, my that, my whatever. What are happening with these things? We need to create momentum. If we don't get energy flowing, it gets stagnant. Stagnancy leads to if you're not growing, you're dying, right? And I always bought into those things and believed in them. But I truly believe there will come a time in your life when you've gone through many, many mini cycles where life just halts you and says this way or that way. And you can keep going down that path and prolong this and potentially prolong it for the rest of your life and never actually come to this place where you just sit in stillness until the very end of your life. Or I believe you can turn, I see it as I turned right and was no, I'm going down this path and it feels so unknown to my system and there's going to be kicking and screaming. And there's something deeper in me that knows. And that deeper for me has been not that I don't care, but ultimately I don't care if I have to lose everything. If everything has to fall apart, I don't believe that's how it has to be. But whatever it takes for me to go inward and recreate this foundation from the ground up and create a me that is so solid in who I am, in never giving my power away and knowing the ramifications of doing that and knowing that that's no longer an option. And I believe that that's the fast track, even though in the moment and in the last year plus, it has felt like such a slowdown, nothing's happening. I'm handing over something that I built and just letting it fall apart. And that's not the truth. And when I anchor back into the numbers and the this and the that after this season, there's actually been way more growth when we look at everything on a logistics standpoint, when all I did was step away from all the logistics and say, this season, it has to be about me, not from a selfish way. Life has humbled the shit out of me through this process, but through a way of, it has to be about me, and I have to take ownership for all of this, or all of these places I keep looping in relationships, all of these places where it's like, why am I not meeting these kinds of people? Why is there such a dissonance between where I am and everything I can feel my soul pulling me towards? It's not hard work. It's not hustle. Sometimes, yes, but I have no issue with getting down and getting my hands dirty and putting in the hours. I always come alive in my work when it's aligned. But there's a difference between that and allowing your adrenaline or your dopamine or whatever, that addiction, to pull you through, and then coming out the other side knowing that there's some like subtle piece in you, this subtle frequency in you that feels like they've cheated the system, and knows that there's still like, there's just this little frequency of incongruence. It's not even always out of integrity, but there's just a frequency that's not fully satisfied. It's like every location I go when I travel and I'm like, this is home. And I tell myself the whole trip. And then I get to the end of the trip and there's just this frequency that's like, Krystal, this isn't home. And you may never find home. And maybe that's part of this process. But when I actually give into that truth that's like trying to kind of grab at me, but I'm trying to ignore because I'm wanting the feeling of home. I'm wanting the feeling of fullness and like, oh, this is it. Once I have this, then I can take steps to get here. And then it'll be easier to have X, Y, and Z. And so often it's easier to get caught up in that energy and that flow because there is momentum behind it than to sit in our truth and get into, for me, it's like get into my root and meditate and like actually draw that energy down from the excitement of like that heart expansion and all the possibility and actually anchor it into my being. And when I do, and when I can finally get there in my body, there's just this frequency of incongruence. And I truly believe that so many people don't want to be in their body, and especially not down to, you know, the lower part of their body, and actually bring potential in and digest it and find the truth in it and find where they're actually, you know, meant to go in life in this season and trust it. I don't think that's the easy path. So I think a lot of people, I know I spent years sure living in my head, but then the next step was actually living in my heart and, you know, walking around with this open heart and wanting to manifest from there. And it's beautiful and it feels so good to be heart open. But the truth is there's a naivety to it and there's an ignorance because we're not wanting to draw it into our bodies and feel the ultimate truth of who we are, why we've gotten into the situations we have, and to just not hand any ownership over to anyone, to just fully sit in all of that. I don't think that's the easy path. And I think that's a path that so many avoid and hop into different hobbies, different businesses, buying properties, different relationships, whatever gives you that hit of energy in the moment. We can ride that wave and call it congruence and call it alignment, so long as we choose to stay out of our body fully. So I guess this season really has been landing. I mean, what other better way to land fully in your body and in your root and connect back to the earth so that you can ground your soul's purpose into the 3D than to go sit on a mountain for, you know, it's been 9 months now, and stop booking the flights for the most part and all of these pieces, right? So it's not easy, but I would challenge you that if you're feeling that, if you know, and it can be so subtle and it's so easy to cover up, but if you know there's a frequency of incongruence in you, if you're seeing it in your finances, your happiness in your job, in your relationships, your inability to bring something to fruition, I really encourage you to put it all down. Every little thread that you have connected to the outside world, put it all down. That doesn't mean we don't go to work or we don't do anything. Like, I've still been working in the background the last year, but you have to put it all down and strip away all meaning to it, knowing that none of it creates success. None of it makes you a better person. None of it makes you a worse person. Whether it's, you know, I've watched this in my world, whether it's like whatever skeletons are in your closet, whether it's debt, whether it's, you know, failed relation, whatever your shtick is that you sit and hide in the dark. Can you sit with that and make it mean nothing about you And through that process, allow all of your patterns, all of your programming, all of the subconscious to come up and start to pressurize you and start to really build restraint in your system to be able to grow that capacity to hold all of it, because none of it's anyone else's to hold. And it doesn't mean that we don't have friendships and partnerships where others don't help alleviate some of that in moments because they want to, because that's a part of, the purpose of that connection. But can you, when all of that disappears or nobody's available and you feel like you're drowning in your own friggin' mind, can you start to build that restraint to hold? And it doesn't happen overnight. I have made a lot of, they're not wrong decisions, but a year ago I would have said that. But this year I really, especially the last 6 months, just made a rule that there's no rules. So if you want to reach out to somebody and you're like, oh, I can't do that, that's wrong, or they're going to think this, or I can't, I have challenged myself and have had friends challenge me in all those moments. They're like, why not? If you want to, play around with it and see. And really, I think the only reason that I was able to dismantle some really big storylines and I would say like karmic lessons is because I let myself play in the places where I would put up rules before, where the mind would put up rules and make storylines. And I let myself unravel the truth. And it didn't always change the outcome that I was predicting, but it allowed my system to find safety without the storylines, without, the mind taking control, without needing to be right or wrong. So I would challenge you to just take the words right and wrong, and see where your soul, your body, and your mind want to take you in this season. The mind is never going away. So to try and find a piece of cohesiveness with it is really important in this life, because it's always going to be there, and our patterns they don't go away. The things that I feel like I've mastered or healed in this season, they're still there. I still wake up with thoughts of them, but they no longer, take me into a state where my nervous system is dismantled and I'm like, can't breathe properly and this and that. And they just don't take control. And when they do, I sit with it. And sometimes I still take action on them. And then it really reiterates in my system when I take that one step away from my center that I never want to do that again. So can you play with life and play even in like the hot spots of your life and unravel and just be with and create space, even in the places where you don't want to create space, and just trust? Can you step out past, how many steps can you take past comfort into trust? It's easy to trust when you have nothing to lose. It's easy to trust when you have a sense of knowing or you have a plan B, C, D, E, and F, but where in your life can you start to trust? Maybe it's in baby steps so that your system doesn't lose its shit, but start to trust way like outside of that comfort where there's discomfort. We have to meet that edge and we have to step beyond it on our own, or we will always be limited in our power and the impact that we can create in this world. We'll always be limited to the confounds of our mind and what we think we're here to do best and how we think we're here to serve the greater good, when really we have no freaking clue. But until we start to take those boxes down around us of like, once I do this, 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 and this, or I have to take action on this because it's been sitting stagnant, and we start to actually just allow stillness and space to guide us and get comfortable in there. And then we can reintegrate all the pieces. And sometimes, yes, okay, now it's like bringing in the more structure and logics of like, and I will get up and do this from 8 to 10 on Monday mornings. It's all necessary, but we can't get to a place of being a well-integrated and embodied human by trying to skip seasons where certain discomforts take the forefront. It's like the pendulum swing isn't by accident. It's not that we're supposed to learn to skip the pendulum swing and land in the middle. It's that we actually have to have seasons on either side of the pendulum swing to decide that we want the middle. And then when we land there, it actually can feel good. But life is our school. We're here to get curious with it. So ride the pendulum swing, see what's on either side, and then see where your middle is. That's it. That's my first episode of 2025. And I really hope that you create some space to see what your soul actually wants to bring through, not just this year, not in terms of goals, but like really breathe into the lower part of your body and get still and notice where you want to get fidgety, and notice if you want to create stories that support why you must think more logical or do things like this or use this somebody else's systems and ways of doing it, and really let yourself get messy in your own process and create your own process. And it won't be perfect. And it's not going to cover everything. You're not here to do it all and to be perfect in all of it, but you are here to master something. And I don't think you get to master anything in this life without going through the whole cycle and process. And that's why I love coming back to the different cycles in the tarot cards. It's not because I want to put my fate in cards or predict my future. It's because I love the cycle that it shows. It's always showing us what part of the cycle we're in. And in some seasons, we're always going to have to be letting go of different things if we want to learn the purest and, I would say, quickest way through a part of the cycle and lesson in life to get to the other one. We can't hold all of it and try to master it all while something's trying to be amplified. It's like, the main character on stage. It's like, you can't have everybody on stage all the time and have all of them be impactful. And, like, we have to gain the lessons and surrender to the lessons of the season so that we can start to master all the seasons eventually, I don't know. I do know. That is my process today. So thanks for tuning in. It feels good to let momentum flow. Yes. So don't let yourself get stagnant, but also don't abandon yourself or rush the process of becoming, the process of learning restraint and the power of restraint, or the process of total ownership and accountability when the pressure of life is high. Thanks for joining us today. That is it. Be courageous, be bold, let anyone down but yourself along the way as you confidently activate or trigger the correct players in your pinball game. And with an open and defined heart, I encourage you to go forward with curiosity and create the depth and satisfaction in the entirety of your life, the entirety of your career, the entirety of the relationships that your soul came here craving, seeking, destined to create. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love it if you left a review below. You can reach me at thekrystaleffect.com or on Instagram, the.krystal.effect. We'll leave that below.